Truth Tastes Funny is made possible in part by support from my other podcast, Yes Brand. And Yes Brand is a business-oriented podcast. I'm boldly taking brands where they desperately want to go. We have fun. We experiment with campaign ideas. We learn what works for them and what doesn't. And the reason I see the two podcasts as kind of sister podcasts, complementary podcasts, is because Yes Brand is based on the yes and rule of improvisational comedy. Your scene partner makes an offer, a suggestion to you, and you accept it and build on it. That's always been my approach with clients. I listen to them. I hear their ideas. I hear their pain and their happiness and their joy and their passion, and I add to that. I build onto that with a story that I tell. And I feel that the Yes Brand method is really ultimately going to be bigger than just about business. Because if we could learn to do that in our lives, just talk to people, just listen to people, how much more could we accomplish together? It's pretty simple, but you can find out more at yesbrandmethod.com. The funny thing about conscious conversation is that if both people are awake, the conversation becomes more productive. And isn't that fitting when I just talked about Yes Brand? And I haven't even planned that. That was an unconscious conversation about conscious conversations. And this is my conversation with Jem Fuller. What if the truth came in a gel cap and we could just pop it in our mouths and forget about it? Well, it doesn't, and we can't. But we can laugh in the face of reality while plotting our survival. Welcome to the Truth Tastes Funny podcast. I am your host, Hersh, and if my guests can handle the truth, so can you. Open wide, folks. Here it comes. My guest today is Jem Fuller. Jem is a leadership coach, but he began as a barefoot backpacker and kind of hiked his way through the corporate world. And a lot of his clients are still in the corporate world, but he himself is not. Welcome to the show, Jem.
Hersh, thank you so much for having me on your show.
So why don't you start it wherever you feel is a really great place for us to pick it up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's start with this current moment. You know, I've ended up, when I say ended up, there's no end, right? This life thing just keeps on rolling by. But here I am now as a father and partner, and between my partner and I, we have 4 teenagers from 18 down to 13. And, we live in a little surf town on the coast, which is wonderful, a really wonderful place to live. So feeling very lucky and have got to a point now where I can feed my kids doing something I love doing. So that's really lovely place to be. And it has been a super colourful journey to kind of land in the middle here. And I've been out to the extremes. You know, when I was a younger adult, I was very anti-establishment. So I went through my punk period of rebelling against the system and, everything that entailed. In living in squats in abandoned buildings in London and, facial piercings and stuff back in the 90s when no one was doing it. And I'm reasonably covered in tattoos. So that was those days. And that was me exploring as to, trying to find a sense of identity and how do I fit if I don't want to be part of the mainstream? What does that look like, And to a certain degree, taking it all so seriously, and as we do, and then coming through that when I had kids, I fell in love in my late 20s and then kept traveling around the world. So I've spent a lot of time traveling to foreign countries. And then when kids came on the scene, it was like, wow, I'm a dad. I've got to find a way to feed these little people, and I'd never had a career before. So I got a job with an international travel company because I'd been traveling for a long time. Then was the chapter of the suit and tie and the corporate leadership and climbing the corporate ladder and, getting sucked into that game of the pressure to drive net profit, month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year. If you're not growing that net profit, you're irrelevant. And all of the pressures, all of the the ramifications of those pressures. You know, I was drinking way too much booze. I wasn't being the person I wanted to be. I was not aligned with my values. I was on the outside. You know, if Instagram was a thing back then, which it wasn't, but if Instagram was a thing, my life was an Instagram feed. You know, it was like, oh, I've got the perfect job and beautiful wife and children and a home that we'd built and everything. So from the outside, it looked wonderful, but I was deeply, deeply unhappy. And I'm glad I'm not in that chapter anymore, because it wasn't very pleasant. And again, you know, getting sucked into this whole taking everything so seriously. But then had my beautiful midlife crisis / awakening, and remembered to lighten up and come back to myself again and repair the relationship with myself, essentially. But I had to lose everything. Lost my career, lost my house, lost my marriage, lost everything, except my 2 boys. I've got 2 boys, and I had them week on, week off. I still do. And they were my leverage. They were my light. You know, they were the catalyst for me to really go, hey, Jem, come on, man, sort yourself out. So I did. And, I began the journey of that.
When you were in the corporate world, did you find that your life grew in a way to demand that you stay in it? In other words, did the money or the success kind of dictate that leaving would be dangerous, you know, for
completely
you, or risky?
Yes. Yeah. That's so well put, and so true, because the more money you earn, you know, the bigger the house is that you build, which means the more money you've borrowed from a bank to build that house, metaphorically and literally. And so, yeah, you get caught in this. I got myself into a situation where I couldn't leave, because if I left, how was I ever going to earn that much money on my own? Was the thinking, you know. So yeah, you feel stuck, 100% stuck. And it wasn't until I got kicked out. You know, I got turfed, unceremoniously kicked out of I lost my job. But at that time, I didn't go back and get another corporate leadership role, despite my family and my friends saying, Jem, you know, you owe the banks a lot of money. You've built a big house and you need to go and get a corporate job. And I said, no, I've got to reset, you know. And I had already decided that I wanted to start my own coaching practice one day. But I just thought, no, now's the time. I had a small handshake from the job, you know, a small bit of money. And I took that money and went and studied human behavioral profiling and neuro-linguistic programming and coaching, the things I was fascinated in. So I took that money and spent it on my own development and getting some qualifications in that space. And then I started my own business, and it was sink or swim. I was in the deep end. I owed a lot of money, but I had to lose my house. You know, that's how committed I was to it. So sold the house. I had a bunch of debt. I had no belongings. I gave everything to my ex-wife. I said, I don't want to fight over anything. You just have it all. And so when me and my kids moved into our first rental property, and I was in my early 40s, we didn't have a fork or a spoon. We didn't have beds. We didn't have crockery or cutlery. We had nothing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, geez, I'm really starting all over again, you know.
How old were the boys?
So the boys were 8 and 6 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
At the time.
And how was that transition?
It was tough for them. It was really tough for them. In fact, traumatic, especially for the younger one too. You know, the last thing in the world they wanted was for their mum and dad to separate. You know, that was probably, I think if I look back over my, you know, reasonably colourful life, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, was tell my children that their mum and I were separating. Yeah. That was super tough.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I fell in love with my partner now, and we are lucky to have a very conscious, beautiful relationship, which I'm eternally grateful for. However, when we were falling in love, it was super tough for the boys again, you know, especially the younger one. He was, you know, it was just harder for him. So we went through the tough stuff with that, and for her children, it was hard for them too. And, you know, thankfully now, 8 years into that relationship, and the creases have smoothed out, you know, and the kids are all good. And you know, the kids actually now get to experience and observe a functional relationship that's full of love. We don't fight. We treat each other beautifully. we're very conscious. We're best friends. We run businesses together. We run retreats around the world together. We parent very similarly. And so our children get to see a functional relationship, whereas before they were watching their parents fighting and, not being so nice to each other.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I listen to young people who, they're in their 20s or so, or, under 30, and they want to get married, and they want to have kids, and they want to do all of this stuff. And I can't help but feel like there should be some caution about doing all of that too young. Because, in the case of my first marriage, it was only youth and neither of us knowing really what was the best fit for us. Neither of us changed dramatically as human beings. It was just those 10 years were a lot of development. Those were our early 20s, our mid 20s, our early 30s. And so I wonder what your thoughts are, on human development. What does it take to be a good partner, do you think?
Wow, it's a big, beautiful question. I think the overarching answer to that is that the more conscious we become, i.e. the more aware we become, our ability to be a better partner, but our ability to be a better person, a better friend, a better whatever it is that we do, our ability to be a better partner expands with our expanding consciousness. So, and that means just being more aware of ourselves, more aware of when our ego is getting in the way or driving the bus, more aware of, when we are reacting defensively to any stimulus from around us, whether it's our partner saying something or whether it's something we see on the news or something somebody says on Twitter. When, we react very defensively, and that's our sense of identity. And for me anyway, this journey of conscious awareness, this journey of being able to mindfully observe my ego, my identity, stomping its feet, so to speak, has been wonderful, because you don't always have to succumb to that. You can notice it and let it just dissipate without reacting. So our ability to be able to pause and take a breath and choose how to respond rather than just defensively reacting to life all the time, and I think that can make you a much better partner.
Yeah, which dovetails with the title of your book, The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men. The conscious communication of it. Why did you write the book?
I started writing a book on communication because I'm passionate about it, and I was looking at the state of play globally, at people shouting at each other across these digital divides of difference, I call it, online. And also more immediately for me with my clients, I'm a leadership coach, and so often when a leader comes to me with a challenging situation at work, or a situation that they need to try and resolve or improve or lead their team in a certain direction, so often it's just falling over in miscommunication. You've got these two people and they're just missing each other. They work for the same organization. They want the same higher purpose. They're aiming for the same outcome. They're on the same team, but they feel like they're not because they're missing each other in the communication. It's the same in relationships. I look back to my first marriage, and we loved each other. No question, we fell in love with each other, but we were just missing each other in the communication, and it just the divide got more and more to the point where it was, irreconcilable. So communication, I feel, is really important, and I started writing a book on communication in lockdown, in COVID, and I had a book writing mentor, and she was reading the manuscripts, and she said, "Oh, I'm loving this book. It's wonderful. It's great, but you need to pick an audience. It's too broad. You're writing too broadly. So pick an audience that you want to write for." And she said, "I think men really could do with this book." And I'm passionate about that as well. I've been sitting in a men's circle down the coast here for 12 years now. A group of us men sit around a fire and we talk to a theme of, our experience and what it's like to, in inverted commas, be a man, and the challenges that presents. And also the whole but the whole situation that boys are indoctrinated into this patriarchal society, and we're told this is how you should be a man, and we're told to divorce ourselves from our emotional selves. Don't cry, suck it up, toughen up, harden up, be a man. We get taught this as boys. And so there's a lot of men of my generation, our generation, in the States, also here in Australia, who don't know how to connect with their emotional selves and how to express themselves and how to communicate more intimately. They've just been taught not to do that. So I think there's a big opportunity for us as men to be able to improve those abilities.
Also, if you're presumably working as a leadership coach with female executives, female leaders, it behooves you to have a really good understanding of the masculine, perspective and challenges, and the feminine challenges, and the challenges to equality and equity in the workplace. Appreciation of someone and his contribution in spite of their gender or their orientation. The workplace can be a very tough culture, for any number of reasons. What do we have to do to repair or improve our workplace cultures?
Yeah, well, you mentioned something there that I think is worth us focusing on in these corporate workplaces, in this business culture, which is the understanding, appreciation, and then the utilization of both masculine and feminine energies, which we all have access to both. So
right.
Like you said, this is not a gender thing, and it's not a male-female thing. People, humans, have access to masculine energy, which is result-focused, linear, achieve the goal, take action, get on with it, right? Bottom line, make it happen is our masculine energy. And the feminine energy is more human-centric. Like, we're in this together, we're people, we're humans. Emotional intelligence, how do we communicate, how do we interact? Expanded awareness, aware of more than one thing at once. Lateral thinking is a feminine energy quality, not literal thinking. So we have access to both of these energies, and I believe that we should be changing consciously, talking about this, and I do this with my clients. We should be changing the workplace to be more human-centric. The post-industrial revolution time of make more widgets on the production line and make as many as possible and make as much money as possible is becoming less relevant. In modern times and post-pandemic times, it's really now about, what value are we bringing to humanity, and how are we doing that working together as humans, as people. So we need to shift, and there's no point in, yes, I'm all up for equality and I'm all up for, I'm 100% up for that, but there's no point in putting females into leadership roles if they have to just succeed using their masculine energy and become like a male energy in a female body. What's the point of that? We need to change the environment. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, very well said. Because the idea of a woman competing in a man's world, the problem with that is that it's a man's world. So yes, they can adapt, they can out-tough the male, they can outperform the male, but that doesn't fix the dynamic. Do you think that in what appears to be an increasingly purpose-driven or cause marketing, environment, are we really shifting? Like, are businesses really shifting, or are they paying lip service to the idea of DEI, let's say, to cause marketing because they know they have to have they have to be doing something good in order to be accepted in today's world? Like, from your point of view, from what you can see, how much shifting is going on?
There's definitely a shift. A shift. There's definitely shifting happening. And there's, the more I kind of connect with people like you around the world, the more I see that there are actually good people on a similar mission doing what they can do. Now, is the balance of that to a majority of corporate world or business world changing? No, not yet. I don't think so. This change is sometimes frustratingly slow, but at the same time, that is what it is. And so people like me who are working face to face with leaders, helping them change the way they lead, we're at the pointy end of change. And so there's a lot of kickback to it. I'm selective with my clients. If I get offered work with a big corporate and I can see that they're not going to change and the work I'm going to do with them is just them ticking a box and saying, yeah, we got this coach in and he did some stuff around equality and we ticked that box, I say no to that work. I'm not interested in wasting my time if it's not going to have any positive impact. So I'm pretty selective with my clients.
That's really the guidance aspect of it. It applies to almost any area. The notion that until someone wants to change, they won't. 100%. Whether it's, in talking to people about addiction or talking to people about their relationships or their job or their health. Until they make that decision to listen and to be open to change, there's nothing that can be accomplished. So their sincerity is so important. And on the other side of that, without a really good leadership coach in this case, or a really good doctor, or a really good, spiritual advisor, whatever it may be, without that guidance, guiding hand, there isn't the wherewithal for them to change either, because you need the perspective, you need someone to partner with you in your change. But I wonder sometimes if the bigger powers at work there, it feels like whether it's in the United States or globally, I relate mostly to what goes on in my country because that's where I've been for the last 2 years with very few exceptions. But, which was not the case three years ago. So I can't comment as much on what's going on internationally, but it seems like there are very small pockets of power where those interests are the ones being served. And so, talking about corporate stuff like that. What do you think we can do in our lives that can actually influence the trends in the world, that can push the world at large toward a more humanity, deeper sense of purpose, less greed and less selfishness?
Yeah. Well, look, I think what we shouldn't do is succumb to apathy and cynicism and there's no point because the powers that be are too powerful. That's what we shouldn't do. And then what can we do? Well, that depends for each different person. But first and foremost, live the life that you aspire to in terms of the way you show up. Treat treat the people around you the way you feel that humans should treat each other. Be kind, be conscious as much as you can. Be loving. Any of your core values, the ways that you believe that humans should ideally show up, be that. Show up like that each day. That's the first step.
Yeah.
And then how much you want to play a part in trying to influence the evolution of us as a species, the expanding consciousness, how much you want to play a part of that, that's up to you. You might have John who lives in a small town and John doesn't want to try and save the world. John just wants to, run his mechanic shop in the small town. He just wants to be a nice guy. He wants to be the best husband he can be and the best mechanic he can be. And maybe he goes to church on a Sunday and he just wants to be the best, community member he can be. That's great. Go just do that if that's what you want to do. But then you might have Mary, and Mary wants to get out there and start a podcast and she wants to change the world. Go, Mary, go. So what can we do? do whatever it is that you feel to do. But the first point I think is important. I think it's important not to just give up and say, well, the powers are too powerful. I'm just going to kick back and do nothing because there's no point. Right? That's when we start to lose. Yeah. So I think just be engaged, just show up as the person that you choose to be. It's interesting, man. I don't know whether what's his name? Johann Hari is the author, and his latest book is Stolen Focus. There's a plug for you, Johann. It's a great book. Anyway, in this book, he talks about change. What can we do to affect change? And he speaks to this point. And he mentioned, for example, there was, before we understood that lead was poison, we had lead in our petrol, we had lead in our paint, we had lead in our pencils, we had lead everywhere, but we didn't know it was poisonous. And then when we understood it was poisonous, but the big industries, they weren't going to change. They were just selling as much paint as possible that had lead in it. They weren't going to change. And petrol, they weren't going to take lead out of their petrol. There was one woman in England, in the United Kingdom, who took this on as her cause. And she rallied and rallied and rallied, and she dedicated her life to saving our children from lead poisoning. And she spearheaded the change. And now we don't have lead in our petrol, and we don't have lead in our paint and our pencils because of this one woman. So I think it's important to remember that you can affect change. You can be a part of change. So feel empowered and do whatever you feel to do to remind humanity that we are essentially good. I believe we are. I believe that most humans wake up in the morning and think, I want to be a good person today. But it's those ones that are super, super loud and aggressive, Yeah, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think so too. I think it's interesting. I think one of the telltale signs that we are naturally inclined toward goodness is that when we're not good, we try to convince ourselves that we are. If we didn't care about being good, we would just say, screw it. I'm a jerk. I'm an asshole. I am not interested in being good. But instead we're like, I'm a good person. I do this. I do that. I'm doing it for and we're lying to ourselves in many cases, but we're inclined to feel like we're good. Yeah. And so we justify to ourselves. And there's something hopeful in that notion, because the idea is that well, it takes a lot of effort to convince yourself that you're good when you're really doing bad things. You might as well just try doing good things and have less work on the back end, of trying to convince yourself that you're good.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
But one of the things that, thank you. Well, one of the things that's required if you're going to pursue your mission is resilience, because there's going to be pushback. Personally speaking, how do you maintain your resilience to the challenges that you face?
One of the key aspects to my resilience, and it's the reason that I was attracted to your podcast, was when I saw that we need to remember to be able to laugh at life, right? Because our suffering exists when we take everything so seriously. We take ourselves so seriously. So one of the things that's really helped me with my resilience is the discipline of a positive perspective, and also the discipline, and when I say discipline, because sometimes when you're feeling flat and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling like it's all too hard, it's not easy to remember true perspective. It takes discipline. It's like, oh, hang on a second, I need to actually get my perspective back again here for a sec. So I'm going to go outside on a clear night and I'm going to look up at the stars and I'm going to remember reality, like the actual reality of where I am and when I am in time, and the fact that it's a ridiculous miracle that the Earth even exists at all, let alone me. And that we're on the edge of the Milky Way galaxy, which is 120,000 light years across. And the Milky Way galaxy is one of billions of galaxies, right? And in the scope of time since the Big Bang, humans have only been around for a second and will be gone at some point in time. And my life actually doesn't matter, right? To remember that, and really just to lighten up and say, wow, I forgot that. And I got so caught up in my life being so important and woe is me kind of thing. And then you remember, wow, I just forgot reality. And you chuckle and you go, all right, so now I'm going to go back into my life and I'm going to do my best. I'm going to show up. I'm going to love my kids the best way I can. I'm going to make mistakes and chuckle at myself because my intentions were good, but I stuffed it up. That's okay. I'm going to meet people in the street and I'm going to smile at them because why not? Because that feels nice. It's better than scowling at them, you know. So yeah, perspective, in answer to your question, dudes, the perspective has been a big part of resilience for me.
Yeah, perspective. That's beautiful. That was a beautiful, strategy. It really is nice. I mean, what I do is similar but different. What I do in such a circumstance is I go outside in broad daylight and I just look up at the sky and a bird shits on my head and I realize, hey, you know what? That's the perspective that I needed. That's exactly right. That's right. I can look all the way up there into infinity, and from somewhere in there, a bird's going to take a poop on my head, and that's going to remind me that I don't really matter, that I'm not special. But of course, you're leaving it to chance that a bird is going. You have to choose an area that's highly populated with
birds,
with wildlife in the air, and
go and stand under a nest under a tree.
Find out the same. Yeah, stand under a nest. Well, a lot of us will prod that hornet's nest. That's another thing that human beings do, right? Is antagonize nature or antagonize. And by nature, I mean human nature, nature as a whole. We do what children do, which is to push boundaries and test boundaries. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves for making mistakes, like you alluded to making mistakes. What have you learned from the process of making mistakes?
Wow. I mean, that's the whole way we, improve is through making mistakes. If we never made a mistake, we'd never evolve, grow, or improve, And it seems to me that we learn the most through the most painful mistakes. You make a little mistake and you kind of go, oh, yeah, well, that didn't hurt too much. But when you make a mistake that hurts, that gets your attention. You're like, oh, wow. Oh, no, I don't want to do that again, And then we bang our head on the same low-hanging doorway many times before we learn to duck, But yeah, no, mistakes are imperative to what we do. And, I don't even really see them as mistakes anymore. What's most important for me is intention. If your intention is good, then that should be important. It should be important what someone's intention is. If their intention is good and for the greater good, then, and then if they make a mistake, in inverted commas, i.e. they try something that didn't work so well, that's okay. That's just a part of the process of, improving functionality.
Yeah, and I think we might serve ourselves better by differentiating between mistakes and choices that we make. A mistake can be a well-intended flaw in our estimate of what we thought an outcome would be. So that's exactly what you're saying. My intent was not to do any of this stuff. My intent was to achieve this result, and I was mistaken. That I tried this tact and it didn't work. But I think sometimes we make choices that, on some level, the same way I think with criticism, that when someone gives us really constructive criticism, on some level we knew that already. We just hadn't heard it or seen it. But we know it. So they're pointing it out to us. Do you feel sometimes with your leadership coaching that you're pointing out things to your clients that should have been maybe obvious to them, but they just didn't have the perspective to see it?
Yeah, I don't think if I'm helping a leader understand something about the way they're leading that they didn't understand before, I don't think it should have been obvious to them, because it wasn't. So therefore it shouldn't have been. But, and so that's okay. I look at what I believe is functional, and what I aspire to help my clients do is to create cultures, team cultures, organizational cultures, where feedback is welcome, where mistakes are necessary, where we're leaning into this together, supporting each other to try and keep getting better at what we're doing, and to try and deliver the most value in the best way possible through our service or product or whatever it is that we're doing. you know, and that means that we should support each other to make mistakes. You know, someone says to fail often, quickly, get on with it, you know, try stuff. And let's support each other to feel psychologically safe enough to have a crazy idea that doesn't work. You know, every genius idea until it worked was crazy, you know, and people would come up with an idea and everyone's going, no, that's crazy. That's never going to work. And then when it worked, it was like, wow, you're a genius. You know, so we should be having lots of crazy ideas, you know, and to create an environment where that's okay, to create an environment where the people there feel that if their intentions are good and they're really trying to serve the greater good of the organization, that when they have crazy ideas or make mistakes or say silly things or whatever, if their intentions are good, that they're safe. Their leader has got their back. You know, I think that's important.
Can anyone learn to be a good leader?
Yeah, look, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's easier for some people than others. Some people just really, you know, their natural behavioral style, they just don't want to be a leader. They'd rather just be a team member and feel significant in what they do in their part of the team. There's some people, you know, and so they don't have an inclination. They say, oh, I don't really want to be out the front leading this group of people to wherever we're going. Theoretically, hypothetically, can anyone be a good leader? Yeah, I think so. And at points in our lives, we all have to step up and lead. You know, as soon as you become a parent, you're a leader as well. You know, so we all have opportunity, whether we like it or not, where we need to step up and lead, and even self-leadership, so leading yourself from where you are to where you want to get to. But, you know, in the more stereotypical kind of, you know, corporate or business world leader, you know, it's much harder for some people to lead than others.
Yeah. And then I didn't want to close our conversation without getting at least one good fire dance story.
So when my wife and I, we were recently married and we were living in Taiwan, teaching English, kindergarten teachers. And I knew how to play with fire, you know, and you have fire on the end of a staff and, you know, you light the ends of the staff, or fire on poi. It's a New Zealand thing called a poi, where you have a fireball on the end of a piece of string and you spin it all around and it looks beautiful, right? And I knew how to do this from my years of traveling. And we were standing outside a pub and I was just twirling fire out on the street just for entertainment's sake. And this Taiwanese guy came up to me and he said, hey, I'm an artist agent here in Taiwan and I can get you work. I can get you paid work twirling fire out the front of the department stores on stage to music, etc. I said, great, let's do that. And he saw my wife, you know, this beautiful young woman standing next to me, and he said, can she twirl fire? And I said, no, she doesn't know how to. And he said, well, if you can teach her how to twirl it and get her to wear not so many clothes, I can double your money. Or more, or triple. I can get you triple, you know. And I looked at my wife and said, do you want to learn how to twirl fire? And she said, yeah, that's fine. So I taught her how to kind of just spin it around a little bit. But that's what they wanted. They wanted this hot, beautiful Western woman wearing a bikini, twirling fire. And we got, you know, way more money than if I had done it on my own. So we did that for a year and earned pretty good money doing that.
That's perfect. See that? Where in Taiwan did you live?
We lived in a small town outside of Taichung, which is the second biggest city, and it was called Fengyuan. And we lived in a village there, and I was a kindergarten teacher for a year. So I had 20 little beautiful, gorgeous little 4 and 5-year-olds who didn't really speak much English. And the school we taught in was called Buckley American School. And because the Taiwanese culture, maybe still now, this was quite some time ago, was aspiring to be American, you know. They wanted everything American culture. They had the American department stores and the American fashion and all this kind of stuff. And so in the school that we were in, we had to teach our kids how to speak English with American accents, right? We had to teach American phonetics. So I, you know, if I was teaching the word hot, like it's a hot day in summer, we say hot. You guys say hot. And so I'd have to teach the kids to say hot. It's a hot day. And so when I'd come into class in the morning, all the kids are sitting in front of me. And I'd say, good morning, kids. And they'd say, good morning, teacher. And I'd go, how do we say it in Australia? And they'd all go, g'day, mate. So I had them learning Australian accents as well.
That's great. I've been to Taiwan many times for work, and I've been to Taipei quite a bit. I've been to the other end of Taiwan. This was as recently as 3 years ago, I think, and so in Taipei at least, the westernization, so to speak, of the malls and stuff, the stores, is still riding pretty steady there. You can go into an H&M or whatever it might be. But a beautiful country, just a beautiful country.
Amazing. And I don't know if you've been to the Royal Palace Museum, where they've got all of the artifacts from the Ming dynasties. Yeah, that museum still to this day, I think, is the most amazing museum I've ever been to.
Thanks so much for tuning into Truth Tastes Funny. If you enjoyed the experience, please leave a 5-star review and share this podcast with your friends.